Hello, my name is Tim Mendees. I'm a horror writer originally from Macclesfield in the northwest. I now live in Brighton, as far down south as you can get. Thank you to Sarah Archibald for inviting me to the Brechin and Angus Bookfest. I'm here to talk a little bit about myself. I've got a reading and a couple of other bits and bobs to share with you. First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I've only really been writing seriously since, I had my first publication in December last year. I started sending out submissions around about July, something like that. Since that time, I've had 50 stories accepted for various anthologies and magazines internationally, and I've had 2 novellas picked up for publication as well. I'll be talking more about one of those later. First of all, I just want to talk a little bit about how this sort of happened. When I left school, I became a chef, and I've always loved writing, even from an early age. In fact, one of my school friends remembered a horror story I wrote in primary school. It was sort of my homage to, the Halloween and Friday the 13th films, the slasher movies. I'd just been to Butlins on holiday, so I did Death at Butlins. My teacher sent a letter home, basically saying, yeah, your son's a bit disturbing. But it's something I never grew out of. And while I was a chef, I still wrote, but it was always just to the back of work diaries. For instance, I gave everybody that worked with me an animal, and I anthropomorphized them. And then I used to write these stories about the animals getting various ridiculous scrapes and that kind of business. But around a few years ago, I developed a serious spinal condition called transverse myelitis. And that basically, when it first hit, it took out my entire right-hand side. I was completely paralyzed. But I've since made a great recovery, but I never know when my legs are going to go out from under me. I also have these really wicked spasms, which that wouldn't be really great if I was holding a knife in my hands. So I was sulking, really, and I was doing what I normally do when I'm having a bit of a bad time. I sort of lost myself in the works of H.P. Lovecraft, and I got this idea for a story, and because I had time to do it, I just did it. And that turned into a full-length novel, but I hadn't written seriously for so long that I'd completely forgotten what I was doing. So it needs a lot of work to bring it up to scratch. It needs at least the first 5 chapters need a complete rewrite. But after that, I got the bug, so I started writing these short stories. And like I say, I was published in Death of Butterflies in December, and that was my first publication. I've since been published in about 26, I think it is, anthologies and a couple of magazines, with a lot more still to come out. Yes, so that's basically, and my inspiration is, like I was just saying about H.P. Lovecraft, he's one of the big inspirations for me. I've always been a massive fan of the weird fiction and cosmic horror. A big fan of Arthur Machen and Algernon Blackwood, Robert W. Chambers, Clark Ashton Smith, those sort of guys. Growing up, and Poe. I mean, one of my first memories is my grandparents were like Reader's Digest, and they had one of those ghost story, horror story things that they used to put out, and there was a Poe story in it, and that kind of got me on this sort of macabre path, you may say. So yeah, and the modern writers, I'm a big fan of people like Caitlin Kiernan and Laird Barron, W.H. Pugmire, them kind of people. So it's kind of great to sort of follow in these guys' footsteps who I've admired so long. Right, so what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to give you a little taster of what sort of thing I write. This is one of the shortest pieces I've ever written. I wrote it for Black Hare Press, an Australian publisher. I wrote it for their anthology Envy, which is part of a 7 Deadly Sins series they've done, which is really cool, and they've got some absolutely fabulous covers. Unfortunately, I can't actually show you the book because it hasn't arrived yet. Because I wanted the hardback, because it's in paperback, hardback, and obviously ebook, but it hasn't arrived yet. So what I've done is I've printed the cover off, because I think you'll agree it's an absolutely superb piece of work. I hope you can see it. I know that's dark. Oh, there you go. Yeah. See, it's a lovely bit of work. And all of the Seven Deadly Sins series are absolutely phenomenal artwork, and that's a bit of a hallmark of Black Hare Press in general. Right, so what I'll do now is I'll read you this story, which is from that book, Envy. This is called The Envious Eye. Envy is a curious thing, especially when you're a teenager. All those hormones running wild mean that the green-eyed monster is never far from the surface and can be summoned over the pettiest and most inconsequential of reasons. Rob was part of a small social group of 15 to 16-year-old rebels. These were the school slackers, smokers, underage drinkers and skirt chasers. Never the most popular kids, but not the outcasts neither. Most of the school looked upon them with a kind of confused awe. These were the lads that never did PE, because an exemption note was easy to forge. They never turned up to detentions. Rob used to collect slips. He had hundreds of them by the time he left. And they never did their homework. They preferred to smoke dope, and listen to grunge instead. Every UK school in the early 90s had a group like Rob and his friends. The biggest event on their social calendar was Saturday afternoons. They would meet up, those that hadn't been grounded for rolling in drunk, late or both on Friday that is, and head into town. Towns are exciting places when you're a teenager, and not the soul-sucking ordeal that they become as you get older. The group would spend an hour or two flicking through the local record shop, then dedicate the remainder of the afternoon to attempting to pick up girls, indulging in what Pop Will Eat Itself described in their seminal 1987 classic as Beaver Patrol. Once they failed in their mission, and let's face it, when your most sophisticated technique is to lick a finger, touch a pretty girl's coat, and say, "We had better get you out of those wet clothes," it was inevitable. They headed to George's Cards. It was not merely a card shop. George's was a mecca to the alternative crowd of Bettles Cove. George stocked an eclectic mixture of occult and spiritual paraphernalia, everything from pentagrams and crystals to incense, ceremonial daggers, and strange herbal medicines. But this wasn't the big draw either. The big draw was the wide range of adult gifts. Everything from inflatable sheep to chocolate willies. You name it. If it was rude and hilarious, George stocked it. Magic eye pictures were all the rage back then, and the concept was simple. You stared at a seemingly random patterns of lines and blocks, and as your eyes relaxed, you saw the picture hidden within. That was the idea anyway. Rob was buggered if he could ever get the damn thing to work. Maybe it was because he was born with a squint and had corrective eye surgery as a child, but whatever the reason, he could never see the magic picture. George stocked a wide selection of magic eye books in the back, next to the Viz annuals and Fangoria magazines, and Rob's friends would invariably spend ages staring at them. "Ooh, it's a cat!" one would shout. "Ah, it's a rocket!" another would pipe up. And all the time, Rob would just be staring at a bunch of random squiggles. Rob started to get jealous, really, really jealous. It was almost like his friends had another world that he wasn't privy to. It was like he was being shunned and excluded. His friends had laughed at Rob's inability to discern the pictures. They'd tried to help, after a fashion, but to no avail. They told him to let his eyes relax. Easier said than done when you're staring and blinking at a jumble of blocks and lines. Rob tried and tried and tried again. He tried all the various ridiculous methods suggested by his friends, but none of them ever worked. The closest he came was when he tried after smoking dope, but in the end he had just become nauseated and forced to vomit. His friends thought that was hysterical. One miserable Monday afternoon, Rob wandered through town despondently. He had skipped school early, which was usually a cause for celebration, but it was so he could go and have a rotting tooth yanked out, which was certainly not. As he passed George's on his way home, a pang of envy hit him. He had managed to hustle a few quid at lunchtime by selling ciggies at an extortionate rate to desperate schoolmates, so he went inside. Rob had just enough loose change to purchase the cheapest Magic Eye book. It was a local, self-published affair by a local artist. It was touted to have been influenced by the works of Poe and Hammer Horror, so it was right up Rob's street. Once home, Rob locked his bedroom door, dimmed the lights, and set about conquering his adversary, the Magic Eye picture. He was determined to beat this thing. Envy is a superb motivator. Rob's eyes focused on the dingy red, black and purple lines. He stared and stared. Nothing happened. Rob cursed and launched the book across the room. After gathering his composure, he tried again. After what seemed like an eternity, something finally happened. But it wasn't what he was expecting. He expected to see Dracula's castle, or the raven perched above a chamber door. Not a formless blob of questionable matter. As he tried to make sense of the thing before his eyes, the form began to writhe and shift. Suddenly, out of his peripheral vision, the room around him began to change. The light altered in hue, and the walls melted away. He would have altered his vision at that moment, but the mass held his gaze like a master hypnotist. The cassette that played on his hi-fi faded away. It wasn't like deafness, but more like it was smothered, like when somebody talks to you and you have your head under the bathwater. It was replaced by a throb, a pulse, almost a heartbeat, something alive. The room had completely dissolved by now, replaced by the void. A swirling vista of emptiness. His blood roared in his ears and his pulse raced. His breathing started to become forced and ragged. Terror gripped Rob's heart like a vice as the form in the picture started to overflow the confines of the book. Tendrils of distorted colour and fronds of filthy-looking ichor started to wriggle hungrily towards him. His stomach lurched like he was on a roller coaster as a weightless feeling took firm hold of his body. He felt like he was drifting untethered and moments away from floating into the deepest, darkest pits of the ether. Rob's mind exploded with visions and whispers. The knowledge of things that no human should know began to subsume his feeling of self. Something was sucking the spirit, the will to live, out of his body with such ferocity that his lungs felt that they were about to burst. The entity before his eyes surged and shuddered with hungry anticipation. It wanted Rob. It wanted his very existence. It had fully eclipsed the book and began to move, free of its anchor at last. With a surge and a piercing whistling sound, it lunged towards Rob. The ghastly appendages strained and grasped, but he couldn't do anything to escape. He was glued to the spot and paralysed. The void rushed and tumbled around him as the roar of blood became deafening. Rob could feel his spirit, his very soul, being sucked from his terror-slackened jaw. The form was inches from its feast when... "Rob, how many times? Your dinner's ready!" Saved by a plate of fish fingers, oven chips and baked beans. Rob hurled the book away from him in panic and managed to stutter, "Okay, Mum, down in a minute." He could hear her grumbling as she hobbled back downstairs. She probably thought he had been discovering his body, Rob reflected ruefully. Rob tried to fathom what had happened as he wolfed down the finest that Birdseye, McCain and Hines had to offer, but drew a complete blank. And later that evening, he took the book into the woods and burned it. He had no desire to repeat his experience. And as for his friend's private world, they could keep it. Rob was done with Magic Eye pictures. Thank you. That was The Envious Eye from the Black Hare Press anthology Envy. You can get that by going on Amazon by typing in getbook.at/envy. Excellent. Yes, so that should give you some indication of the sort of the weird sort of stuff that I write. If you want to check out more of my stuff, I think the easiest way to if you like that reading, I do a lot of live readings on Facebook, which is facebook.com/go to the machine. I do a lot of these type of live readings. It came out of as a necessity, because as soon as I got to the point where I had something to try and sell, to try and do book fairs and festivals, like this very virtual event, the virus hit. So I was having a brainstorm with a writer for a publisher that I'm with, and we came up with the idea like back in March between us. And originally it was supposed to start everybody to do it. But I'm still the only person who's out of our little group who's done it. I've done 18 of them now. You can check them all out, and a load of other things. I do a series of interviews and roundtable readings and roundtable interviews and all that kind of interesting, good stuff. By checking out my YouTube channel, which is tinyurl.com/Tim Mendees YouTube. That's tinyurl.com/Tim Mendees YouTube. Also, if you want to just cut straight to the chase and have a look at what books I've had published, you can just go straight to my Amazon author page, which is Amazon. No, let me start that again. It's viewauthor.at/Tim_Mendees. Yeah, that's viewauthor.at/Tim_Mendees. Now, before I go and leave you to the rest of this event, I just want to talk a little bit about my new novella. It's called Burning Reflection, and it's a novella of Lovecraftian horror, cosmic horror. It's been put out by American publisher Madison Press. I'll just read you the back. It should give you some kind of indication. Aidan's uncle has an odd aversion to mirrors. Although Aidan once suspected the man to be a vampire, the truth is far stranger and far more deadly. It's got lots. It's set in the late Victorian period in rural Cornwall on Bodmin Moor, and it's centered around a family inheritance where all the mirrors are covered. I don't want to give too much away by saying anything, but it takes in a lot of mythos, like Cthulhu mythos elements, and also numerology and the occult. It's had some good reviews so far, and it releases fully on the 11th of November. I will also be doing a live launch event on the 13th, Friday the 13th, aren't I brave? What could possibly go wrong? So if you want to check that out, like I say, you can keep up to date with all my things on my website. I do update it quite a lot. There's a regular blog, and there's more information about the release and about the release party on my website, which I said earlier. If you want to get hold of that, if you want to just go straight to it, that's getbook.at/burning reflection. That's getbook.at/burning reflection. Okay, and my website is timmendeeswriter.wordpress.com. That's timmendeeswriter.wordpress.com. Okay, just check the time. Okay, I've got a couple more minutes, so before I go, I'll just tell you a bit about the story you just heard, Envious Eye. That is probably is the most autobiographical thing I've ever written. Gordon's House of Cards is not only a real place, but me and my ne'er-do-well friends did indeed used to frequent it on Saturday afternoons, looking at all the comedy, risque gifts. It was one of those places where you got like chocolate body parts and all that, It was a great place to hang out. Yeah, so Gordon's House of Cards, if you're ever in Macclesfield or near Macclesfield, pop in. It's on Mill Street. It was there last time I went up, but who knows in this current, that was about 2 years ago now. I was supposed to be going up this summer, but that ain't happened. Yeah, and also, I can't get them things to work. I was born with a squint in my left eye. I had corrective surgery on it as a child, and yeah, I just can't do them. So that that annoyance that Rob felt about all his friends going, "It's a rocket," is true. Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed what I've had to bring to you today, and thank you again for having me. It's a shame it can't be like in person, but like I say, we've all had to think a little bit out of the norm, haven't we, with what's going on in the world. Hopefully, another year. I would love to travel up. It's a beautiful part of the world up there. Absolutely love it up there. I spent a lot of time in Arbroath. I'm a big fan of the sort of the Highlands sort of area. Yeah. So again, thank you to Sarah Archibald, and hope you've enjoyed it. Enjoy the rest of the Bookfest. Good night. Good afternoon. Goodbye.